So, let's get started. It is my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Izzy. Most of you know her. Class of 24, secretary of the class, president of the outdoor club. Let's see, what else does she do? Oh yeah, she did a lot of sport. She did, let me just make sure I get the sports here right. I made some volleyball for 3 years, and now she's doing lacrosse. And she's also volunteering, something that everybody should make sure they try to find time to do because it looks good on your resume. Izzy's volunteering at Healing Hearts, for the horses, best horses team, let them know, right?
Sure.
Sure. And she's also a volunteer firefighter, she gets around. On top of that, Izzy has managed to do research in our lab. She's looking at the effect of CBD on embryo development, so really important research. And but today she's going to tell us about this super amazing thing that she did last semester. And she went to Tanzania and Kenya. She's going to tell you all about that. So please welcome Izzy to our Colloquium.
Thank you to my research director, Thomas Jensen. So my name is Isabella Sancio, or most of you know me as Izzy. And last semester I had the opportunity to study abroad in Tanzania, which was an amazing experience, and I really want to go back. So I hope you all enjoy. I'm going to talk a little bit about just what the program entailed and also the research I did there. So a little bit about me. Jensen got most of it, but I'm from Clinton, New York. Clinton, New York is located on Oneida Nation land, as well as Wells College is located on Cayuga Nation land, and it's really important that we acknowledge where we currently are and whose land it belongs to. And I'd also like to acknowledge the different indigenous groups of Tanzania. Our campus was located on Iraq land, as well as we did cultural experiences with the Maasai, the Hadzabe, and the Toga. So I just want to thank them for being so welcoming. They literally welcome you right into their homes and say, here's a chair, sit down, let's talk. So really amazing. So what is SFS? So SFS stands for the School for Field Studies. These are all of the different countries that they have campuses in, and I had the opportunity to visit 2 different campuses. And this was my entire campus. This was all of our faculty, staff, and students in one picture. And the School for Field Studies is very focused on conservation, learning field skills and field biology, as well as a lot of information on conservation and sustainability. So here were some of the classes that I took last semester. I learned the language of Swahili. I'm not really great at it at all. And then we also did a lot of cultural experiences through that class, which was really cool. We also learned techniques in wildlife management, wildlife ecology, environmental policy, and socioeconomic values, which was where my directed research was focused, and also 2 months of directed research in the field, which was really, really cool. So here's some examples of different field work, or pictures of field work that I did. This is me doing a dilution in the field, so if Burwell was here, I hope she'd be proud of me because I can do field chemistry. And this is us on a morning safari. A lot of our field work was also done in trucks. Obviously, it's kind of difficult to do work on the ground with these animals in the area. However, when we have done it in the past, we did do some work on the ground. You have to have an officer with you who has a gun in case anything happens, but it was never needed to be used, obviously. And this is us doing bug collection and then also setting up camera traps in Kenya for another project. So here are some of my different expeditions that I went on and different skills that I acquired when in the field. I honestly learned so many different skills. I did not know I'd be coming back as a field biologist, but apparently now I am. So I learned to do walking transects, insect collection, and different techniques for that, vegetation assessments and understanding grass and different levels of plants, and also a lot of community engagement. They are very, very connected with their community, which is a little different from, I feel like, Western societies. So that was extremely fun to do. This is us helping out some Maasai people build their homes with cow manure and water, and you use your hands. You're not using any tools, just your hands and cow manure, which is so fun. It was fun. This is a sign that's located in our town. So our town was Rotia, where the campus was located, but the Karatu district is where we did a lot of our field work, and different people would let us walk on their land and do different assessments. This picture right here is an example of what a field lecture looks like. You just bring your chair, your notebook, and your professor will give you a lecture while you're literally sitting in grass, which was also really cool, not being in a classroom where it is that warm outside. And then we also got to do things like homestays. So this is me with Mama Rita doing laundry, and I did all of my laundry completely with my hands the entire 4 months, which is also a fun experience, and it just takes a little bit of patience. So we also did a lot of community service around the town. There was a library that we helped clean and set up new books. We also donated books and coloring books to schools, and we brought sanitary products to an all-girls school. We did planting trees at a tree nursery. So the town is very connected with their environment, and they have a good idea of conservation, sustainability, and also caring about all of the animals that they interact with. So our first safari was in Lake Manyara National Park, which was actually the closest park to where our campus was located. We learned how to do focal sampling counts on an observational study on olive baboons, just to understand primate behavior. And then this was also our first opportunities in understanding mammal identification and being able to tell the difference between all of the different antelopes that we were seeing. And this was also our first time seeing larger animals such as elephants and giraffes. And this is a picture of a baboon climbing on one of our trucks, but this was a baby. It was a young baboon. So then our first expedition was in Tarangire National Park. We did 4 days camping a little bit outside of the park, so these were our tents. We learned a lot of information in Tarangire. We learned to do road transects, so viewing animals from our cars and taking different data down about that. We learned how to do field ornithology and identify different birds. So that was right here, and that was our assigned field ornithologist. So that was a really big help. He knew all of the birds that we were seeing. We also did a whole separate elephant exercise here. We learned how to identify different ages of elephants and also tell if they were male or female. And we also did counts because Tarangire has one of the highest elephant populations of the parks that they have up there. That was one of my favorite things. And then we also learned a lot about predator conservation and radio telemetry. So the director of our campus is actually the head of lion conservation in Tarangire National Park. So Dr. Kasui was able to show us how to GPS track different lions around the park. So this was an example of one of the prides here, and you can see that there's a GPS collar on this female. And just understanding where they're moving around the park, and also understanding what towns they're moving in. Because a big issue in Tanzania is human-wildlife conflict and understanding how these lions are affecting people at the same time. So that's a big thing to take into account when doing conservation projects and working with environmental policy. Is you can't control where your lions are going and whose cows they're going after. We also did community interviews with the Maasai people, and we interviewed them on human-wildlife conflict, and it was interesting to understand their perspective of what it's like living so close outside of the park when your cows are just protected by a little acacia boma. So basically they just pile up a bunch of thorn trees, as we would probably see it, but just a bunch of spiky acacia bushes in a circle, and that is like what we would consider a barn. So their cows will all go into there. However, lions have been able to get to the animals through that. So on our way to Serengeti, we stopped at Ngorongoro crater. This crater is actually at the top of like a really, really large, ancient, dormant volcano. As you can see, like this is the whole outside of the crater, and it creates like a big circle. And you have to like ascend and descend into the crater. Really cool. This was our first time seeing a lot of new wildlife. This is a marabou stork. It's about this tall, and it was really scary. As you can see, its bald head is just, you know, really cute. And it kept stalking us while we were eating our lunch, because you're allowed to get out at certain places and eat your lunch. But what was actually taking our lunch was there were a bunch of falcons that were just swooping down and taking our chicken like right out of our hands. So it wasn't the marabou stork to worry about. And then we saw some animals for the first time, like we saw wildebeest for the first time. And this was our first time seeing lions really up close. In Tarangire, they were pretty far away, and we had to really use our binoculars, but these cubs were a part of a family that was kind of on the outs. The mother was really injured, and the cubs were really skinny, so that was also interesting to see the ecosystem at play. But these cubs were not caring at all about our trucks being there because their mom was injured. My favorite expedition that we did was in Serengeti National Park. So this is the park that you're going to see in all of like the Africa documentaries. It's one of the most famous. And we spent about 5 days, and we camped inside of the park this time. So we did hear lions roaring at night. We had a couple hyenas run right through our campus, but we always had a guard on duty in case anything happened. So in Serengeti, we learned about mesopredator conservation. Mesopredators are what is directly below apex predators, so that's wild dogs, cheetahs, leopards. We didn't see any of those in Serengeti, but we learned about different conservation tactics. A lot of money goes to keystone species like apex predators or like elephants. Not a lot is going into the wild dogs and the cheetahs and the leopards, which are all on the IUCN Red List of Threatened Species. We also learned a lot about the wildebeest migration that goes through the Serengeti and all the way up to southern Kenya. So this is a picture of when we were right inside of the Great Migration, which was really crazy, absolute amazing experience. The Great Migration is about 2 million wildebeest moving as one throughout the entire park, and they continue this cycle all year round, and we were just really lucky to be in this area of the park once they were traveling down here. Also, this is a picture of a hyena with a buffalo carcass. And we also did a morning game drive just to see if we could find any nocturnal animals, and this was the sunrise, and it was insane. So then, talking a little bit about my 2-week expedition in Kenya. Kenya gave me an entirely new perspective on climate change that I was not expecting to gain. Just on this little switch. So basically our students went to Kenya, and the Kenyan students got to experience Tanzania. The Kenya campus was called the Kilimanjaro Base Camp, and you could see the mountain from the campus, which was super cool. So this is a really funny picture of me standing underneath the mountain. And basically, yeah, it was really crazy. I never thought I was going to see a good view of Kilimanjaro, and it is the tallest lone standing mountain in the world. That was about 30 miles away from the mountain. So, Amboseli National Park really, really taught me a lot. They had been in one of the worst droughts since like the 1970s. And Amboseli really showed us. There were carcasses all over the park. This, I believe, is a buffalo carcass, maybe a hippo. And as you can see down here, there's absolutely no grass. This is a hyena with a hyena pup, which was really cute. Also learning about, if anyone wants to look up hyena morphology, very, very interesting, and looking into childbirth, because there's a lot of infanticide that happens with them, but that's a whole other thing that I can talk about, so we won't get into that. Great crowned crane conservation we learned a lot about as well. That's what these birds are down here. So they have a really big spiritual significance with the people of Kenya because these birds used to be all over. And now, unfortunately, the only way that you can see them is inside of the parks. And all of our professors in Kenya were native Kenyans, and they were really upset about not seeing them as frequently. So here's another example of some things that we saw around Amboseli National Park. There were wildebeest carcasses everywhere. And as you can see, this zebra is trying to eat literally no grass. There's no grass. So there was just no rain, and these are all effects of climate change directly impacting all of these wildlife species inside of the park, as well as human livelihoods. So a lot of the people in southern Kenya and northern Tanzania are pastoralists, which means they rely on walking their livestock around, grazing their livestock. However, what do cows and goats need? They need grass. Grass is not going to grow without rain. So here's an example of just some cows that are looking relatively thin, and the zebra walking on just absolute no grass. So the park has become now, they consider it a desert ecosystem, but none of these animals that are living there are able to sustain themselves off of a desert ecosystem. And then this picture down here is like a lodge and a whole tourism facility that they had set up that was unfortunately destroyed by a sudden flood because of all of these just random natural disasters that are affecting them. The same way that climate change we kind of see it in America, they're really getting the short end of the stick. So then we went to Masai Mara National Reserve, and this had a couple positives on the conservation scale. This was our first time seeing cheetahs. This is a male coalition. These are two brothers hanging out. We saw them a lot of times because they were pretty close to where we were camping in the park. And then we also saw 4 different rhinos, which our professors in Kenya said that they hadn't seen rhinos in about 4 years. So that was super exciting, and it was also the closest that they had ever really seen rhinos to us. I guess we were just really good at spotting them. I don't know. But I was not expecting to see a rhino. To me, it felt like, oh, there's like none of them out there. No, there are. They're hiding. So then I'm going to talk a little bit more about my directed research that I did in Tanzania. This is another picture of the Great Migration, and as you can see, those wildebeest, those are all wildebeest. It goes on forever. You would drive for miles, and it did not stop. And they also move with zebras at the same time, which is really cool. So, what is traditional ecological knowledge? Traditional ecological knowledge is what sustains indigenous communities and allows them to share information about their culture and how they utilize the natural resources around them. So their understanding of their entire ecosystem that they've relied on their entire lives and through their past histories. So basically, when it comes to learning about conservation, you're either working with scientific ecological knowledge or traditional. But unfortunately, it took people a while to learn that they needed to work with both. So scientific ecological knowledge is more based on straight ecology, understanding this plant has these chemicals, and also is kind of based in how we use those resources for materialistic human gain. So in order to understand how to move further ahead with conservation, we have to use both. So basically, external influences are constantly affecting how a child is going to absorb this traditional ecological knowledge and get that passed down from their families. So the 3 main things that affect that are going to be your settings, which is the environment that they're in. Are they still living in the same environment that they always traditionally have? Are the customs the same? Has their social, cultural aspects changed at all? And also the adult psychology. If their parent decides, actually I don't want to teach any of my kids any of these traditional values, then obviously that is not going to be passed down to the child. So I worked with 2 different tribes, the Datoga, which are mainly pastoralists, so they have a lot of cows and goats, and they're also primarily blacksmiths. So they take recycled metals and they melt them down and turn them into jewelry, which was super cool, and I got a couple of things from them. And then the Hadzabe are a hunter-gatherer group, and they are one of the only groups in Tanzania that are still permitted to actively hunt wildlife. And they're some of the only people who have traditionally lived in the same place for over 5,000 years in the Lake Eyasi Basin. and still doing everything completely traditionally, still hunting and gathering every day. So this is a picture of them at a fire. As you can see here, there's different skulls and horns of different antelope species that they've eaten, and then this is a civet, or a circle, civet or circle, skin. And as you can see, they're all wearing different skins traditionally, and this is a tuber root, which the women showed us how to dig different roots, and that was really cool, and we got to try that. So my main objectives were to understand what is threatening their TEK, and how does climate change play a role in all of this, and then we had to give recommendations on the community level, a policy level, and also on a research level. So our study area was in this area of northern Tanzania called the Lake Eyasi Basin. As you can see, it's really close to where Serengeti and Ngorongoro are, so the Hadzabe are able to hunt wildlife that are moving from those parks. And then these are all the different towns that we went and did interviews with. The Hadzabe live mainly up in the highlands where it's really rocky, and the Datoga are down in the lowlands where their cows can get grass. So overall, we collected 48 different semi-structured surveys and did 4 different focus group discussions with both of these tribes. And our different topics include traditional ecological practices and understanding what is affecting that and what is threatening their ability to pass down information, and hold different cultural ceremonies, also understanding knowledge passed down, religion, gender roles, and traditional healing. So I got a ton of different data from this project, so summarizing it was kind of difficult, but here's my different results that I found. So overall, the Datoga and Hadzabe tribes view interactions with people outside of their tribes as a main cultural threat. So Datoga children were more being enforced to go to school, so they had to learn English and Swahili primarily at school. And their parents were reporting that they felt like their children were more likely to marry other tribes, and they were losing that ability to pass down TEK because of that switch to a different culture. And then also not being able to learn their traditional language at schools, because they're not taught it, that they only learn it at home. And then for the Hadzabe, they said that interactions with other tribes are one of the biggest threats to their TEK, because the Datoga bring their livestock onto Hadzabe land and scare away the wildlife. So the Hadzabe were pretty upset about that, and it creates a big food security issue for them. And then overall, we found that some did switch to Christianity. Mostly the Datoga, we had 26.9 people had switched over, 26.9% of people had switched over to Christianity, and less on the Hadzabe side. That was pretty interesting to find. Overall, Tanzania is made up of about 120 different tribes, but there is still Christian and Muslim influence throughout the country. And also, when going into these different villages, we saw that they were more likely to have churches in Datoga villages. So despite switching religions, both tribes overall prefer traditional healing methods. Hospitals and modern medicine and pills are something that is a little bit new in Tanzania, so they were a little bit hesitant, especially the Hadzabe, but speaking with the Datoga was really interesting to see what their view was on it, and they had been trying both. They still overall preferred going to traditional healers, and basically a traditional healer they consider medicine men, and we did interview a couple of them. So their whole process is basically, if you are feeling sick, you go to the traditional healer, you say, hey, and it's not even just sick, anything that's going wrong in your life, you go to this healer, and they will go to sleep with your ailment in their brain. They dream and they talk to their ancestors in their dream, and the ancestors will tell them exactly what they're supposed to give this person to make them feel better. They go out, they find those plants the next day, give it to that person. And for the most part, people come from all over, and these medicine men will also travel to large cities that are like 3 hours away just to help people. So it was super, super interesting to see that people overall prefer that method than going to hospitals like we're used to here in America. So overall, it was very obvious that climate change was directly affecting their livelihoods. There was, again, a drought occurring in the Lake Eyasi Basin, and both the Datoga and Idzabe were made it very clear that there was no rain and it was really, really affecting their livelihoods. For the Datoga, they used to have about 50 to 100 cows on average per family. But with climate change, they've either had to switch to new professions in general because all of their livelihoods is selling their cows, making money, or eating their cows for food. So now they have to either start farming, they have to become blacksmiths and start making money through selling jewelry and tourism, or going to the market and buying their own food way more frequently. And then for the Idzabe, it was a very, very large food insecurity for them because their wildlife were disappearing. They were moving further into the parks because there's more reliable water sources inside of the parks. So they have to travel further for their food, and also they're forced to go to the markets and start buying food there and using those currencies, which they were not traditionally used to doing. So that was really sad to see that the country of Tanzania as a whole is not contributing to our global climate change issues, but their livelihoods and their ability to feed themselves is being directly affected by these global climate change issues. So that was pretty sad to see. And then despite threats, the TK is still considered very valuable to them. They would still pass down their stories. They still viewed these stories as valuable, which was really, really important. So in conclusion, the data did support my hypothesis. TEK was being directly negatively impacted by these external factors, and climate change does directly impact the livelihoods of people around the globe. It might not be as clear to us in America how global climate change is affecting people, a little more snow, or like it's a little hot out today, or oh, there was smoke in the air because of some fires. But when you go and you see this with your own eyes, you can see that they can't do anything to change it. They can't be more sustainable. They're being the most sustainable that they can, but they're the ones who are experiencing these issues. And something else that I didn't touch on in Kenya was water scarcity. One big thing that I learned in Kenya is that about for 50 to 100 miles around Mount Kilimanjaro, maybe even further, all of those people are directly reliant on the water that is on top of that mountain, on the ice caps. And as we know, with climate change, those ice caps are melting at drastic rates on top of the mountain. And people have seen over the years, including our professors in Kenya, that there is just so much less water for them. And we saw that with the parks, how there was absolutely no rain. That is all because the ice caps are melting on top of Kilimanjaro, and they can't do anything to change that unless we have global policy change. So overall, my colleagues did a lot deeper research on climate change, so their policies are a little different, but my policies were more focused on preserving TEK among the Datoga and Idzabe. So implementing native language programs in their schools would hopefully preserve those traditional languages, and hopefully they would be able to pass them down to their children. And then also enforcing more land tenure in the Lake Eyasi Basin. So the Datoga are kind of able to bring their cows wherever they want, and that is directly affecting the Idzabe's ability to kill wildlife and eat it. So more land tenure in Lake Eyasi would hopefully help the Idzabe with their issues. However, pastoralists do need to move their cows towards somewhere that has something for their cows to eat, which is in the Idzabe's highlands. On a community level, maybe more organization of community cultural celebrations. The Datoga talked a lot about how they did not have the same resources as they used to in order to do their ceremonies, which includes something specific like I think almost all of them said that their cultural ceremonies, whenever it's something special, they need to sacrifice like a black sheep or a black goat. But as you're losing all of your livestock because there's no grass. The ability for you to find a black sheep or a black goat was becoming more difficult because it is so special for one to just be completely black with no other markings on it. And then on a research level, I would probably study each tribe individually just because they have very differing lifestyles. And I got so much data out of this project that looking into each one separately would probably be really beneficial. And then doing further ethnobotany research, it was really interesting to see what different plants the Hitzabe could use to either help ailments. They also had one that they said has worked for malaria for them for several years, so that was super interesting, and I looked further into that. And also additional interviews with traditional healers, because we only got 2 formal interviews with them. And I'd like to say Asante Sana, which is thank you in Swahili, to everyone who has got me here. Any questions?
Thank you. This was really great. Can you talk a little bit about how this experience has changed your future direction? Because this was a pretty big impact.
I think that it definitely, I went into the program very much kind of chemistry-based, in the lab, very research-based. A little bit with, trying to move a little bit towards conservation, but not really understanding how. And I realized that after coming back that I really, really want to pursue something to do with conservation and sustainability in general, underlying whatever research I do, because I realized how much help is needed in that area, and also how passionate I can be about it, and a lot of other people in the field, which was really cool. So yeah, just working towards conservation of wildlife, probably. Yep.
So you said you have a choice of where you want to go, right?
Mhm.
So why did you choose Tanzania? Like, what stood out there that made you want that?
So, I wonder if I can go back. Okay. So as you can see, all of the different countries that the School for Field Studies has, I definitely had a lot of options. Kenya and Tanzania specifically were both wildlife conservation based. Australia, that was more, I think Australia and Turks and Caicos is more like reef conservation, marine biology. Each one has a different perspective. I know that Costa Rica and Panama are more working directly in towns and working with sustainable farming and stuff like that. So I knew once I looked at Kenya and Tanzania that I had to be one of those, because I knew that I wanted to go somewhere animal related. And then Tanzania just looked like it was going to have everything that I really wanted, plus the campuses are a little different. Kenya is more, you're in a cabin, it's kind of more like you feel like you're camping. My house in Tanzania was like, I had a cement house to myself, which was really nice. And my bathroom was in my house, which in Kenya I had to walk to a separate bathroom, so that too, convenience. Center.
So thank you. As Dr. Jensen said, that was a wonderful performance. We appreciate you doing this for us. I feel like you were pretty much living in the Lion King movie.
Yes, and we said that a lot of times too.
The only thing you're missing is Pride Rock.
Yes.
But one thing I'm wondering, I'm hoping you can speak to for students in here that might be interested. How did you go about funding this? How did you end up going about getting this secured so that you can actually go on this trip?
Yes. So the good thing about this program is it directly connects with Wells. So my tuition for Wells was the same tuition for the School for Field Studies. And the amount of stuff that I did going on just my tuition for Wells was crazy. The amount of expeditions and camping and being directly on these safaris, that's a lot of money. I also was, had the privilege of receiving the Henry Wells Scholarship my freshman year, so I used that stipend to help my flight, pay for my flight over there, which was probably the most expensive cost that I had to do.
So how much did you actually have to come up with out of pocket?
Out of pocket, on the actual trip, most of my money was spent on things that were probably supplemental, like, souvenirs and stuff. But to get there was like, I think maybe about $500 to $700 for vaccinations and malaria pills and stuff like that that you need to get beforehand. So. Any other questions?
On one of your slides, you were looking at basically changing religion and changing medical practices.
Yes.
What's the connection?
So traditional ecological knowledge, I could go super in depth with my research paper, but basically their tribal beliefs are similar to what they're going to do medicinally. So they are going to use the resources around them to help themselves. So if before going to a traditional healer, they would be looking for different plants that they think would help with their ailment. So a lot of people's religion includes the traditional practices, like using your local resources like plants, and then also using the traditional healers. So it was really interesting to see that. I do think that at the end of the day, the Datoga having more of an influence of going to like the modern medicine was because they interact with other people in other villages a lot more. They are constantly like going to markets and stuff like that, whereas the Nzabe are pretty isolated. Yes.
So on that same note, do they have the same ailments that we Westerners have?
Actually, no. I would say one thing that was really shocking to me is how healthy these people really are. You would think that with the amount of technology that we have in America that we would be the healthiest, because, technology and medicine. These people are eating such fresh food. They graze all of their own livestock. They have their own chickens. They collect eggs. They're eating plants from their own farms, vegetables from their own farms, and fruits and everything. And I think that was a good basis for how healthy they were, and also the amount of just physical activity that they're doing on a daily basis. One funny story is we were doing interviews and we were walking around different Datoga villages, and a Datoga man came up to us and asked if we were okay because we were walking for long distances. And he said he'd never seen a white person walk a long distance. They're always in the cars. They're always in the trucks. They don't know how to walk long distances. So that was really funny. They're like, you have so many cars over in America. You guys know how to walk. It was great. So yeah, I would say that was a really interesting thing to see. Like we met people who were also very, very, very elderly. Were still walking around. They're like, oh yeah, and they can't remember how old they are. They're like, I'm 100 and something, maybe, but they're still perfectly fine. The amount of, none of them talk about really cancer or anything, but if they did have it, I don't know if they'd really know if they did, but none of that was really affecting them, and I don't know, it was really interesting. It didn't seem like they really had as many sicknesses as we have here.
I have a couple of questions. The first one is what do you think was the most rewarding part of this experience for going there?
I think one of the most rewarding moments was probably we did a community presentation at the end of our full semester where anybody who we had interacted with throughout the entire semester for any of our field research or any of our lectures or cultural experiences, they all were invited back for this presentation at the end of the year. So one of the guides that taught me how to do walking transects ended up showing up, and I had randomly seen him one other time around the village, but he remembered exactly who I was, and he said that he loved my presentation. He came up, and it was just a big full circle moment seeing everybody and seeing us at the beginning of the semester not knowing what we were doing, and at the end having to present all of our data was pretty cool to see how far we'd come.
And then, the second one is, how hard did you find it adapting to a culture that you weren't familiar with, and also coming
first, I really didn't really know what to expect, but as soon as we started doing experiences and also sitting down with different people, it just showed me kind of like how much we're missing in America on like a community level. I connected with so many people in this country that I've never been with, with more people probably than I ever have in America. So I think one big cultural aspect that I probably wasn't prepared for was how connected I would be with the town and all these people. We had like a local tailor that we would go to, and he knew all of our names and our sizes, and we could just go and be like, hey, like, how are you doing today? And can I, make a custom shirt? I'd say one of the harder things was more just, I think, processing what America does wrong in my brain to me. I liked their culture better than I feel like what I experience here. And a lot of the times through my interviews with the Datoga, they would ask us, what is your culture like? Do you have this many cows? And I'd be like, no, I don't have that many cows. And it was also really funny how they are curious as to how we are here, and it was really hard to describe to them what it's like here, because it feels like we kind of have everything at our hands. I loved how just like sustainable everything was, especially how fresh my food was. Obviously makes me think about our industries that we have in major large corporations of making food in Western society. So yeah, just love that. Yes.
At any point were you like scared or like uncomfortable?
Yes, this is a funny story actually. So when we were in Serengeti, we camped inside of the park, and we were having a fire one night, and everyone had gone to sleep except for me, 2 other students, and the security guard that was sitting with us at the fire. And right next to where our fire was just like the wilderness. Like, you could put on a flashlight and you could see any animal out there. So it was like maybe 11:30 at night, and I was just getting a little nervous, being like, I'm sitting in the middle of Serengeti National Park, I'm not in my tent, and like anything could just come eat me, right? I turn on my flashlight, and staring right back at me was the eyes of a hyena, and I just screamed and ran towards my tent, and I tried telling the security guard in Swahili that there was a hyena there, and I was having a very hard time telling him, I was like, I see eyes, there's eyes right there. And then he looked with the flashlight and it had run off already, so I just probably looked crazy. But it was really scary. I just turned the flashlight on and it was right in front of me, right at the edge of the woods, so. Definitely then. And also when I heard the lions roaring at night, for a second I was like, oh, like, I'm in the savannah, and then like 2 seconds later you're like, that's cool. I'm going to sleep now.
If you had one piece of advice to give people who want to study abroad, like what?
I'd say be very, very open. One of the large things I learned from living in a community was that you have to be okay with literally anybody who might be on your trip. I was very lucky. All 23 people I think that were on my campus I loved, and we were all friends, but some people definitely had some views that I just had to be like, you know what, that's how they are, and I'm how I am, and that's okay. We can still hang out and be friends and have fun. So just being open to all of the people that you might meet, and also just being open to new experiences. I tried some very interesting foods, as Jensen knows. And then you can walk around and you can say, yeah, I did eat a piece of goat testicle because they said that it would help me have manly powers. And I said, yeah, I'm going to eat it. So be open to new experiences. Yes,
One more. How do you reconcile the obvious openness and welcome that you felt from the people there and their concerns over these interactions reducing their traditional ecological knowledge and preserving their cultures?
So a lot of these people are actually very, very open to tourism. So for the most part, at first, we were kind of seen as tourists, but that is a very big way to make money in Tanzania. One thing I didn't talk about was how COVID really affected people in Kenya. It really affected affected the bushmeat industry in general and like poaching. So when you have no money and your job is closed because of risks of COVID and you're in a third world country, you still need to eat, you still need to make money somehow, so people do things like killing a giraffe and selling that for money. You know, you have to do what you have to do. So that was really interesting. And then feeling so welcomed, we invited all of the people that we interviewed back to our community presentation, and they also were just like, give us chairs. And I don't know, it's just something I definitely wasn't used to, and I kept thinking if you walked up to somebody's house in America and you said knock knock, they're not going to let you in and give you a chair. And we did say, you just walk up and you say knock knock in Swahili, and that's how you are. Like, I'm here, I'm at your home, and they're like, come in.
Okay, I think we are just about out of time, so let's give Izzy one more round of applause. If you have additional questions about anything that you didn't get a chance to ask, please stick around. She'll stay around for a few more minutes to answer anything that you guys have, okay? Thank you again for coming to Science Colloquium this week. It was great having everybody, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Yes.